How can a human body so fragile in life remain for 3,000 years? This is not a riddle. It is a fact of my work. I have seen it with my own eyes. I have stood in the silent tombs and looked upon the faces of kings and queens who lived millennia ago. Their skin, their hair, their very features are still there, waiting for us to uncover their stories. The ancient Egyptians mastered a secret that has puzzled the world for centuries. They found a way to cheat time itself. They turned the perishable human form into a timeless monument, an eternal vessel for the soul. The question we must ask is not just what they did, but how they achieved such a miraculous feat of preservation. The mystery begins in the desert sands of Egypt. Within the hidden valleys, a civilization obsessed with eternity left behind its greatest treasure, its people. These were not simply dead bodies, they were carefully prepared mummies intended to last forever. When the first modern explorers opened these tombs, they could not believe what they found. They saw pharaohs who looked as if they were merely sleeping. This incredible preservation was not an accident of nature. It was the result of a highly sophisticated process, a deeply religious practice, and a surprisingly scientific approach. It was a sacred art perfected over many generations. For us archaeologists, every mummy is a library of information. It tells us about the person's life, their health, their diet, the world they lived in. But more than that, it reveals the incredible ingenuity of the ancient embalmers. These were not just priests performing a ritual, they were skilled artisans and practical scientists. They understood the human body in ways far ahead of their time. The process of mummification was a long and sacred ritual. It typically took around 70 days to complete. It began with a purification ceremony. The body was taken to a special tent known as the Ibu, the place of purification. Here, the embalmers, highly trained priests, would wash the body with water from the Holy Nile. They would also use palm wine, which had mild antiseptic properties. That initial washing was both practical and symbolic, preparing the body for transformation. A ritual of rebirth, mirroring creation myths where life emerged from primordial waters. Next came the most delicate and important part, removal of the internal organs. Decay begins quickly from the inside, fueled by bacteria in moist organs. The ancient embalmers understood this perfectly. They made a small incision on the left side of the abdomen to remove the stomach. They removed the intestines. They removed the liver. They removed the lungs. The heart, however, was almost always left inside. It was seen as the center of intelligence and emotion, needed for final judgment in the afterlife. The brain was removed through the nostrils using long, hooked instruments to break it up and pull it out. It was a difficult procedure that required great skill. Once the organs were removed, the body cavity was washed again with palm wine and spices. Then the real secret to preservation began: dehydration. Embalmers packed the body inside and out with a special salt called natron. Natron is a naturally occurring mixture of sodium carbonate and sodium bicarbonate. It was found in dry lake beds of Egypt, like the famous Wadi el Natron. This salt is a powerful desiccant. For 40 days, the body would rest in a pile of natron. The natron would absorb all the liquids from the tissues, stopping decay by killing moisture-dependent bacteria. After the 40 days of drying, the body was a shrunken, leather-like husk. Embalmers would then remove the natron and cleanse the body one last time. They anointed it with expensive oils. They used resins and perfumes to make the skin supple and smell pleasing for the gods. The empty body cavity was then stuffed with linen, or with sawdust, or with other materials to restore shape. The incision on the abdomen was sewn up and often covered with a protective plaque depicting the Eye of Horus. The body was now ready for the final stage, wrapping. The success of mummification depended on a specific set of tools and materials, each with a practical function and a deep spiritual meaning. The most critical material was natron. This divine salt was a purifying agent from the gods. Its power to dry and preserve the body was seen as a miracle. Large quantities were mined and taken to embalming workshops. Without natron, the long-lasting mummies in museums wouldn't exist. The internal organs removed from the body were not discarded. They were preserved separately. After being cleaned and dried with natron, the lungs, the liver, the stomach, the intestines were each placed in special containers. These are the famous canopic jars. Each jar was protected by one of the 4 sons of Horus: Hapi, baboon-headed Imseti, human-headed Duamutef, jackal-headed Kebasenuef, falcon-headed. The jars were placed in the tomb with the mummy to make the deceased whole again. Once dried and prepared, the wrapping began. The process could take up to 15 days. The body was wrapped in hundreds of yards of fine linen strips. Embalmers wrapped each finger and toe individually, then moved to the limbs and torso. Between the layers, they placed magical amulets for protection: Ankh, life; Digid pillar, stability; scarab beetle, rebirth. A heart scarab was placed over the heart with an inscribed spell. Finally, sticky resin from conifers was poured over the wrapped body. The resin formed a waterproof shell, protecting against moisture and pests. It helped seal the mummy, creating an airtight barrier. The completed mummy was placed in nested, decorated coffins. The mummy, the amulets, the coffins. This package was placed within a sealed tomb. The tomb was the final sacred layer of protection, a secure and sacred fortress designed to keep the body safe for all eternity. While the ancient Egyptians saw mummification through religion and magic, we can now look at it with modern science. It was a brilliant application of chemical and biological principles. The main goal was to stop decomposition. Decomposition is caused by 2 primary agents: the body's own enzymes and microorganisms, bacteria and fungi. Embalmers targeted both threats systematically. Their success wasn't magic, it was ancient biochemistry. The first key principle: dehydration. Bacteria and fungi thrive in moist environments. By removing water from tissues, the Egyptians made an internal desert where microbes couldn't survive. Natron salt made that possible. By osmosis, salt drew water out of cells, leaving them dry and sterile. As Dr. Salima Ikram notes, the Egyptians created an arid environment inside the body, mimicking desert burials. The second principle: antiseptic agents. Dehydrated bodies were anointed with oils, spices, and resins. Chemical analysis shows cedar oil, palm wine, and plant resins on mummies. Many of these are naturally antibacterial and antifungal. Resin hardened into a waterproof seal around the body. That seal kept out moisture, insects, and pests. Drying plus sealing was a powerful 1-2 punch. Finally, low oxygen in the sealed tomb. Nested coffins and a closed tomb limited available oxygen. Oxygen, like moisture, fuels decomposition chemistry. Dry, sterile, low oxygen, suspended animation. 3-pronged strategy: remove water, kill germs, and cut off air. This environmental control is the secret to 3,000 years of survival. Our knowledge of mummification is not based on guesswork. It comes directly from the rich archaeological record that Egypt has so generously provided. The ancient Egyptians were meticulous record keepers. Papyrus Ebers, Edwin Smith Papyrus, both describe medical and embalming procedures. Tomb paintings showing funerary scenes. Reliefs depicting rituals performed on the mummy. Images act like an instruction manual, tools and steps. They confirm what the mummies themselves tell us. The greatest proof is the mummies themselves. Ramesses II, lesser-known nobles. Each mummy is a time capsule. For years, we studied them only from the outside. Now modern technology lets us look inside without unwrapping. CT scanner and 3D imaging of skeletons and soft tissue. Scans show the embalming incision. Scans show the absence of the brain. Scans show stuffing materials in body cavities. The scans confirm ancient accounts with stunning accuracy. Scans reveal details of ancient lives. Arthritis evidence, dental problems. We can estimate age at death and sometimes cause of death. King Tutankhamun. CTs clarified his injuries and health. CTs revealed amulets tucked in wrappings, invisible to the eye. Like X-ray vision, confirming practices from the Book of the Dead. Lab analysis reveals embalmer's toolkit. GCMS studies of resins identify chemical makeup. Resins traced to trees, some imported from Lebanon. Canopic jar residue analysis confirms preserved organs. Linen wrappings with inscriptions sometimes show weaving year. From grand tomb interiors to a single grain of natron, all evidence fits into a scientifically verifiable picture. It is easy to think of mummification as a strange and distant practice, something that belongs only to the world of ancient Egypt. But the principles developed by the embalmers thousands of years ago still have relevance today. Their deep understanding of preservation has echoes in many modern scientific fields. One of the most direct connections can be found in forensic science. When forensic anthropologists need to preserve tissue samples for later study, they often use methods that are conceptually similar to what the ancient Egyptians did. Dehydration, the use of chemical fixatives. The ancient practice also informs the modern field of conservation. Museum conservators tasked with preserving ancient organic artifacts, including the mummies themselves, face many of the same challenges as the original embalmers. They must control humidity, temperature, light. The resins and techniques used by the Egyptians have been studied to understand long-term material stability. Modern conservators are continuing the work of the ancient priests, using new technology to fulfill the original goal: to make something last forever. The study of mummification provides a unique long-term experiment on the preservation of biological tissue. There have even been attempts to replicate the ancient process. In the 1990s, Bob Breyer and Ron Wade undertook an experiment to mummify a modern human cadaver using the same tools and materials as the ancient Egyptians. Their work, documented for the world to see, proved that the ancient methods, when followed faithfully, were incredibly effective. They replicated dehydration with natron and organ removal, creating a modern mummy that demonstrated the scientific validity of the ancient texts. The project showed that Egyptian embalmers were not just priests, but experimental scientists. This connection between ancient practice and modern science is a powerful reminder of human ingenuity. The desire to understand the world and control our environment is not a new phenomenon. The ancient Egyptians, driven by profound faith, developed a technology of preservation unrivaled for millennia. They were pioneers in anatomy, chemistry, material science. When we study a mummy, we are not just looking at a relic of a dead religion. We are looking at a testament to scientific innovation and a legacy of knowledge that continues to inspire and instruct us thousands of years later. The mystery of Egypt's mummies is, in the end, not a mystery at all. It is a story of incredible achievement, born from the fusion of deep religious conviction and brilliant practical skill. The ancient Egyptians did not just hope for an afterlife, they engineered it. They took the terrifying reality of death and decay and, with their own hands, transformed it into a promise of eternity. Each step of the 70-day embalming ritual, from the first washing in Nile water to the final sealing of the tomb, was a deliberate act of science guided by faith. It was a process designed to build a bridge between the world of the living and the world of the gods. The embalmers were the master architects of this bridge. They were priests who understood the sacred texts, but they were also surgeons who knew anatomy, chemists who mastered the properties of natron and resins, and artisans who wrapped the body with reverent care. By conquering decay, they did not conquer death itself, but they did achieve a form of immortality.